we are now starting our discussion on management now and beyond. We have done so many topics in this course so far, and now we are coming towards the end of the course. Let us see the issues that we have to look at. Now, first we are looking at the global organizations and workforce development. And today's lecture is based on the experience and the recent research studies in India, and many of these we have done out here in IIT Delhi. And this is one of the current issues that we have to understand in the process of understanding management studies. We are into a new business environment today, and globalization is becoming so important for us because Indian economy and the organizations and development, these have taken new shape and they look different because we have matured perhaps organizations, economy, and lot of development has taken place over the years. So Indian organizations have become global in the recent years, and there is excellent growth in many sectors, and FDIs and FIIs are pouring in. This clearly suggests that India is emerging as a major economy in this millennium. So as a result of this, there have been many changes in our management thinking, management experience, and management practices. One of the most important factors which contributes to the growth is to understand the diverse, motivated workforce that is intelligent, aspiring, and trained. So this population is being further trained to cope up with the competition that we have in the environment, and so this is a great asset for us. Hence, the importance of human resource development becomes an important issue, and perhaps it becomes inevitable because the workforce development is very, very important for any economy. And in fact, from many quarters we hear these days that in spite of our growing population, there is shortage of professional skills and employability skills. So we need HRD as an important factor for the economic growth of our country. As we have discussed also earlier, that in spite of the best technologies that we have to see that Indian population, which is growing, which is perhaps by some estimate going to become India is going to become perhaps the most populous country by 2035. So we have to also look at the HRD practices which will actually enhance the economic growth for India. We have already started seeing that. how global corporations are coming to India and how India is becoming global. So, for these there is a great challenge in terms of human resource development. Looking at the global corporations or global organizations operating in India, we find that the organizations range from small entrepreneurs organizations to private sector, to public sector and the multinational organizations. And many of these organizations, private sector or public sector organizations, have become global in their business in the recent years. And many multinational companies have come to India to do their business. So, in terms of economy, we have no choice. We have to see that we are perhaps the leading force in terms of the development of India, and where the management studies become very important, in fact inevitable for all of us to understand some of these concepts which we have done in this course. So, when we are looking at the global corporations, many organizations emphasize that only those organizations, in fact there is an error here, that only these organizations living inside the sectors of health, NGOs and the social organizations, etc. Some of these we are not really mentioning in a big way, because we are emphasizing more into business organizations and the industries and so on. And for understanding this in terms of a managerial thinking or in terms of the research studies which will give us some formula for prediction and the analysis of situations, we must use multivariate analysis structure. And when we attempt to analyze this, we find that such analysis is presented with a view of strategic thinking, strategic links for workforce development. An attempt has to be made to present the multivariate conceptualization. As we have seen also during the discussion of this course, that unless we have gone multivariate in our approach, we may not be able to actually arrive at sound scientific conclusions. The reason being that the whole social system and whole organizational system has number of parameters which need to be unfolded. Hence, the understanding of management studies calls for multivariate designs of research studies, as well as the decisions which are made based on this. In our section on methodology, we were talking about these as to how to go about conducting scientific research study or a scientific inquiry, and what's the language of a scientific inquiry. That we have done earlier in one of the lectures. In fact, we extended that for another hour also. Hence, we have to see that the variables, the meta level, the macro level and micro level, all these set of variables must be considered in our management thinking. And in this process, we need to understand these multiple levels simultaneously and prepare for managing dynamic processes like work culture, values, innovations, change and HRD. All these topics separately we have discussed, and now what we are trying to understand is that as a managerial thinking, just understanding a topic separately will not help you, but you have to combine all these to actually make your decisions. This brings us to some of the issues of governance. And when we look at governance, we find the issues like governance related to development. Obviously, when we are talking about governance, we are looking at some of the outcomes like development and sustainability and performance and so on, but generally development. So, in governance, the issues like culture, mission and values of the organization, performance, education, etc. become very important. And so, from here we move on to talk about the changing nature of the workforce in India, and the issues there are the issues of education. Education also has implications for our strategies for governance, but here again I am repeating the word education, because education as a total process is important for bringing about change in India in terms of its workforce and the human resource development, HRD, which we call. Awareness, education is important, awareness is important. Diversity, you would recollect that we had lectures on diversity and we looked at the how to value diversity at the place of work. And the diverse population that we have in India, perhaps nowhere in the world we have so many issues of diversity. So good India is, so rich India is, and the issue of diversity has to be actually tackled by the managers of today, wherever they are. They may be in an industry or they may be managing an organization, the government sector or whatever. Then gender becomes an issue, and in our lectures again we had discussed about gender and how women as workforce are becoming so important in our country, that this no manager can really say that okay, blindfolded, I do not want to look at this workforce, because there are sectors where women are doing excellent, and as a development process also we have women as the future workforce of all the countries, but India too. Then personality development of people. Okay, it is not just the responsibility that parents have, that okay, look at only the health, physical health of their children, but also the personality of their children, not in terms of the physical health, their thinking, their personality attributes, their emotional intelligence, their way of looking at the world order, the world view that they have in their minds, the values that they have in their minds. So, lot of responsibility of this of course is with the parents, and then of course the organizations like schools, and then the colleges and then the professional institutes. So, this becomes an extremely important factor, though intangible. Sometimes people do not value that because it does not have the tangible direct perhaps result in terms of money in return or something of that kind. But then this intangible factor is an extremely forceful factor in managing organizations. This brings us to the issue of organizations, that they do not run themselves. I am sure all of you have given a thought to that organizations do not run themselves. Someone has to run the organizations. So, individuals release their personal power and control to the organizations in order to make the organizations effective and more efficient. So, it is the people who run the organization. That is why just ignoring people for running the best of the organization perhaps is not possible. It is going to be a fruitless exercise for us. Yes. So, we have to understand that how do we change the HRD perspective. The organizational priorities have changed in the recent years, and which focus and which have moved from the piecemeal training programs to more systematic HRD exercises programs with strategic roles. So, nowadays we are just, not that we are not giving trainings on a specific issue. Sometimes when it is the issue of a technical training, we have to do that. We have seen that in our chapter on training and development. But when we are moving and when you are the manager and you really want to make your organization really a world class, you have to see that it has to be not a piecemeal exercise, but a coordinated system based exercise, HRD. Yes. So, we have to then look at the issue of strategic HRD, and strategic HRD function includes a variety of activities. Yes, we have discussed about the strategic management also in the introduction of this course. So, we are talking about the strategic HRD functions, which actually talks about the variety of activities, and the key factors among them is deciding what staffing needs are, staffing needs, and so what staffing needs that you have, whether to hire employees to fill these needs, recruiting and training the best employees, ensuring they are high performers, and ensuring your HR and management practices conform to various regulations. Yes. So, we have to actually design our system in such a way that we can take care of human resource development in a very systematic way. This role and exercise of staffing requirement of HRD is not only of strategic and perhaps critical importance to the future of organizations, but also to the future of HRD itself. Here the issue also comes about innovation and the competitive advantage. Some of the studies that we have also conducted related to the issues that I am discussing today. Innovation and change basically is market driven sometimes, often, okay, and need based sometimes. So, we are not trying to say that market driven innovation and change should not be considered, because after all we are there in the economy where there is competition, but there is also need for innovation, because everyone has creativity and the opportunity should be given to them to come out with their creativity. And so, this is being imperative for the competitive advantage for any business that we have today. When we are looking at again the globalization and human resource management, globally corporations are striving to achieve sustainable competitive advantage through human resources and the processes for managing it. As a result, people management has become an important factor in today's organizations. And in India, we have two types of global organizations. The Indian organizations, I have already discussed this, let me once again say this, that Indian organizations which have global business and the multinational organizations which are operating in India. In either of these cases, HRD becomes an extremely important factor. And the strategic management, there are initiatives for global organizational integration and mergers and the acquisitions, and there are careful designs for developing managers for multinational business. Once again we will come back to the issue of mergers and acquisitions in the later part of this analysis. Yes, right now let us first talk more about the HRD, and I will move on to some of those aspects once again. And so, India has planned enhanced emphasis on understanding and designing strategies for managing and developing workforce diversity. When we are looking at the organizations, we have to understand that increasing capabilities, motivation, organizational commitment, values, participation, involvement in decision making, improving quality of life and work culture, and some of these aspects are important where global organizations in India also stress, and the issues like innovation, attitudes, personality values, corporate values, culture, social responsibilities and ethics and developmental needs. In fact, when I am saying this, in a way it's a sum total of what we have done in some of the earlier lectures. So, you can keep that as a concluding some sort of a concluding statement that as part of management studies we have to look at some of these factors. I will emphasize on some of the special issues like the values and missions of global organizations in India, even though all organizations wherever they are, they have some values and some mission, some vision. And here I am just in a limited way from the literature available to me or the experience available to me, after I am trying to put this. So, values of successful Indian global companies reflect some of the parameters, and I am just trying to put some of these parameters, okay, and which you can see now. If you want, you can also note down some of these, that these have the issues like integrity, these have issues like trusteeship, these have issues like respect for professions, these have issues like team working. So if you wish, you can perhaps note down that how the visions and missions of different organizations are different. Okay. Yes, do you want me to read out each one of these? Perhaps I'll show you this, that this is based on certain surveys. These are some of the statements of values and mission of various organizations. Yes. So you can see that there is ethical issue that becomes important, commitment that becomes important, respect for people that becomes important. Yes. So this is in fact a long list of the factors like discipline, honesty, flexibility, helpfulness, involvement, all these. So different organizations have given different missions and different vision and values for their organizations. This the same list goes on, including the styles of leadership, and you have for example transparency as one of the factors. So all these factors are important. You can just see that some of these factors. Yes, I'm holding this. If you want, you can just have a look at that very carefully, or you can note down also that. Okay, so I move on to discuss the values of organizations in the era of globalization. So just a little bit of analysis of that. If you want, I can show you the list once again in the later part of the lecture. So in the era of globalization and liberalization, we find that there are many many issues have emerged in the operation of the multinational organizations, where employees from different parts of the world, they cherish the individual values, the nature and the cultural values of our country. So they come to India, and then they cherish the Indian values in many ways, including the Indian food and so many things. And so many things, of course, we need to improve, as all of us know. We need to improve on many fronts to really cope up with this world competition, which so far we have not been able to do, because perhaps the kinds of attitudes that we have, the minds that we have, so HRD becomes very important for us. So from here we move on to the issues of personal values that you might have, which interact with the organizational values and influence the behavior of people in organization, and the choices at work and job performance, these get affected. It is important for the organization to actually respect the employees and recognize their personal values, and involve them in decision making and consider these in their own decision making process, for better functioning of the organization. So, alignment of personal and organizational values influence the job satisfaction of people, turnover issue. We are talking about the employee turnover. We have also discussed earlier, in this course about the employees turnover, intentions and organizational commitment of the employees. These are some of the issues that which we are looking for while discussing the effectiveness of an organization, which we have discussed in the earlier part again, that an organization becomes effective because of some of these parameters. So, when we are looking at India in the years to come, the next millennium, the challenges, we have to see values can be described as the core competencies of an organization as well as an individual, and imbibing culture as the vehicle that will lead to sustainable competitive advantage. Yes, we are talking about the future challenges India in today's globalized economy. Yes, we are trying to conclude the course, the various topics which we took individually. Now we are trying to put them in together to arrive at our conclusion here. In a study of public and private sector firms, we found that the Vedantic values are emerging out of Indian philosophy, play important role in the organizational commitment of managers. You would recollect when we were doing our lesson on values and missions, I mentioned to you that we had conducted a study and where we found that the Vedantic values become important, we can say parameters or predictors of organizational commitment of managers in both public sector as well as in the private sector. We had sample of public sector and private sector managers, and we found that the Vedantic values do make difference in their commitment level. So, we have this issue for putting that into our HRD exercise, because once in our study says that certain kinds of values are important, perhaps we could give them some exposure, some training, some opportunity to really grow in that direction. In another study of the automobile sector organizations, we had found that the value institutionalization is an important predictor of HRD climate and organization. This is in the automobile sector. In fact, we had compared the profit making and loss making automobile sector, and we found that the HRD climate through which value institutionalization is possible, that is an important predictor. In other words, the profit making and loss making companies gave us different profile in terms of value institutionalization. Then integration framework of workforce development in global organization in India has been discussed in some of the issues that I am taking up later. Let us see the issues like what are the factors that we could integrate in the workforce development. And here I have talked about the workforce development. I do not know whether the model is very clear to you. You can see that how the workforce development that gets affected by number of factors, and you can see that how a manager could look into the workforce development issues. And we can see that if we have the workforce development in organizations, this all the, in fact, most of the aspects that we have discussed in our different topics, I have tried to put that in this model. Well, yes, that is my model, and which I had presented in one of the international conferences as a part of my keynote presentation, where I was invited. That was the 6th International Conference on Workforce Development at Taipei. And this model I had presented, and the idea that I was trying to present also here in this model was that we have to create an environment, we have to look at these parameters, and if the environment, I am talking about the social, organizational, cultural environment, where there could be an ecological succession. And over the years, when the ecological succession will take place, there is a possibility of much better workforce development, for which of course we will need the support from various quarters, from the organization, from the government, and then how this affects the issue of management of change and development and so on. So, the workforce development becomes one of the most challenging issues for us, and we can't create conditions where the ecological succession will take place. So, the topics that I have listed here, the issues which I have listed here are what we have already done in this course, and how we could actually integrate that for the human resource development, for India's achieving India's global success, and perhaps meeting with the challenges in the next millennium. Yes. So, we are moving on to talk about some other issues which will also impinge on, reflect on this model which I have discussed, and let me now discuss some of the issues of this model which will come now. The issue of learning, organizational learning, learning organizations, knowledge management, this has become inevitable. And so, in all organizations, HR becomes a critical factor for success of organizations aimed at sustainable competitive advantage. So, we need to have the learning issue, that is very important. This has implications for required competencies of managers, management education, and development of human resources, human resource practices within organizations, HRM practices, and these are greatly influenced by learning, knowledge, creativity, capabilities of various types, capability enhancement, and the skill development. Just to list a few aspects of organizational learning or learning, overall learning in organization. So, the organization does not have to be stagnant, just one particular thing and then you stay stagnant. By stagnant I mean that only the same production or same thing or same procedure or same policy is going on. So, that is not really going to give us much results. But if organization is learning, there is a renewal, they are renewing in fact themselves. So, organization becomes more effective. So, you have more of research and development, you have more of knowledge management, you have more of new policies, you have more of innovation, you have more of HRD, you have more of training and so on. So, organization learning becomes important. So, learning overall. So, as a concept, strategic human resource management places a great emphasis on the capacity of learning about organization's environment, performance, objectives and capacity to learn from change and the sustainable competitive advantage. Based on a sample of 300 randomly selected managers from 9 global corporations in India, using a Likert scale, we had conducted a study, and the results of this study reveal that there is a significant difference in the organizations in terms of the analysis of learning and strategic human resource management factors within the strategic paradigm. So, we conducted a study to find out this relationship of learning with various strategic human resource management factors. Now, influence of HRD initiatives on learning in a challenging environment becomes important. In another study of 100 senior HR managers, we find, these are from 3 different organizations, we find that they have managed to expand the scope and mission of HRD from merely upgrading the technical skills of their employees. Their management is ensuring that all their employees understand the company's vision and develop the skills and the competencies for success of the organization. These are some of the research studies I am trying to share with you. Another issue is of leadership and culture in the organizational life generally, but organizational transformation with specific reference we are talking about here. That today's world is characterized by increasing global competitiveness, changes in the characteristics of the workforce development, discontinuous organizational change, impact of information technology, revolution and the new geographical economic union, some of the factors which we are talking about. So, these and many other such factors make it necessary for the organizations to adopt these strategies to manage change for sustainable competitive advantage. And in this changed milieu, leaders and their role competencies become most challenging, okay, and these issues will then shape the organizational success. In a case study of ABB, Asia Brown Boveri, we have found this is a plant at Faridabad. Yes, we observed that leadership has brought about change in the corporate culture. As a result of this, industry has become very competitive and has become global in terms of their business, in their yes, they have become global. I am talking about that particular company where we had conducted some study, and we really acknowledged the permission given to us. And in fact, many other studies, the studies which I am quoting here, I acknowledge all the industries for giving us permissions. And also when I am talking about them, their names, See, many industries sometimes when we go to conduct studies, they do allow us, but often they say that you need not mention our names. This is one of the issues, when we are conducting research in the organizations. Then we come to the issue of empowering leadership in some Indian global corporations, organizations. In this study of Indian managers coming from different organizations like manufacturing, oil, aviation, social organizations, pharmaceutical organizations, information technology organization, banking, and so on. We have connected. So, here there are so many industries which were involved, and we collected data from these industries. We found that manager's perception becomes the basis of data collection, and we found the perception, how the manager feels, that kind of a data collection was there. So, we found on the basis of manager's perception for data collection, the results that the correlation coefficient between empowering leadership style and perception of climate in banking sector, manufacturing sector, oil sector and aviation sector, this was significant. Pharmaceutical sector, information technology sector, again significant, these are significant, and various industries depicted a positive correlation between these two factors. But let me mention here, not all industries mentioned that. Some industries mentioned, and the results showed a positive relationship between the two. So, if we really want to go ahead, then we have to talk about empowering leadership style in today's time, and the empowering leadership style is creating a climate, creating a culture, work culture in organizations where people will come out with their, where the suggestions very we can say clearly to actually invest their time and ideas in the organizational functioning. So, that was a study which we have conducted in many organizations, and we have compared, and some of the results we have also published and presented in some of the national and international conferences. Yes, you will find some of these references in the list of references which I am going to give you at the end of the course. Then we come to the issue of organizational culture and HRD. Organizational culture provides an ideological perhaps context for an organization, and based on a survey research, we have found certain results. So, one of the papers which we had we have presented in one of the international organizations, that organization culture has a positive impact on the strategic HR perspective. Based on the sample of 300 randomly selected managers from 9 global organizations operating in India, using a 5-point Likert scale, the result reveals that there is significant difference in the organizations in terms of analysis of culture and HRD factors within strategic management paradigm. So, this was another study, in fact, the same study that I am talking about. Another in terms of the earlier study that I had mentioned on empowering leadership, that is a different study. And here this study we have the, 300 managers from the 9 global corporations where we have conducted this study. So, the strategic human resource development, partnering the enhanced organizational performance, this issue also we discussed. And here let us see that in the current economic climate or the scenario that we have intense global competition, and it is now becoming surprisingly very high, and we find that the organizations are experimenting with HRD systems in the never ending search for the panacea of these problems. Most of the organizations are searching for the appropriate HRD system, because they have all started realizing the fact that unless we have the professional skills, unless we have the generic skills, perhaps people will not be able to make contributions in this global scenario. Then we come to the issue of testing this, to test whether or not different strategic HRD practices have an impact on organizational functioning. We conducted another study. This was a survey based study, and the sample again consisted of 300 managers. In fact, that was one of the larger study I am mentioning here, in which the similar sample number is there. So, out of that larger study, 2 or 3 international presentations and publications we have done. So, in this study from Indian and foreign global corporations operating in India, we found that we examined the relationship between the strategic HRD and the organizational performance. In order to summarize what we know about the effects of strategic HRD and the organizational performance, the available literature of course here has described and evaluated with the result of this paper. So, whatever was the existing result of other countries, that we try to evaluate along with our paper, and the findings of this research highlight the positive correlation between these factors and the positive influence of the strategic HRD practices in enhancing organizational performance. The findings did reveal that the significant differences in strategic HRD processes and practices among Indian and foreign global corporations are there in this study. In yet another study, we talked about the organizational commitment and human resource management practices in Indian organization. In fact, organizational commitment here is a caption that I have tried to give, perhaps organizational commitment is the caption that I have tried to give here, and a study of science and technology professionals in the Indian context. Here there is in this study we have looked at the research worldwide has indicated that HR practices have potential to influence the employees' commitment also. Many studies have said that. So, in the present study we have attempted to examine the relationship of HR practices and three distinguishable part of commitment, that is the effective, continuance and normative. In this study, yes, and the literature shows, in the chapter on commitment we have talked about these 3 types of commitments given by various researchers. Yes. So, the findings of this study have indicated that the HR practices can be one of the organizational tools to manage the development and commitment of the employees by way of demonstrating their support, and for them in turn there is they have the attachment with their employees, and so there is a natural reciprocation. So, the employees have commitment towards the organization and the employer, and in turn they will give you the same reciprocation. So, overall the study has important implications for the strategic human resource management for any organization to achieve competitive advantage in today's global environment. Now, another issue that we have looked at here is the impact of career and background variables in the on the organizational commitment. And here we found that organizational commitment has been viewed as the employee's loyalty and in the organization having important consequences for the overall commitment of employees. So, we found that organizations showed fewer days of absenteeism and more productive activities in the organizations. All these attributes are significantly important for effectiveness of any organizations, and these studies have strongly indicated that for the career development also the commitment becomes an important factor. HR practices and the background variables could be one of the organizational tools to actually manage the development of commitment among employees by way of demonstrating their support for them and in turn inculcate attachment among the employees as a natural process of reciprocation. So, in this study we found these relationships, positive relationships, and there are important implications for strategic human resource management for any organization to achieve competitive advantage in today's global environment. Organizational commitment and HR policies, these also have the mediation role in the organizational support and organizational justice system. So, in another study again we found the relationship between organizational commitment and the HR practices. These are not unconditional, they are actually they are the intervening mediated variable. So, they mediate between the two processes. Intervening, I think we have discussed that earlier part of the course, that there are independent variables, dependent variables, intervening variables and mediation variables. So, we are saying that these are the factors which are actually the intervening, they have the intervening effect on the functioning of the performance of people. Thus, it is strongly recommended that the use of procedures by the organization as one of the important factors used for employees in evaluating the supportiveness of organizations. Now, Indian perspective on strategic HR roles and organizational learning capability that we have already discussed very briefly, but we can this is another study. Yes, this study indicates that the correlation coefficient are mostly significant and positive between the organizational learning capabilities and the HRM practices. And the discriminant function analysis, perhaps some of these I have already discussed in the chapter on methodology. So, I will quickly go through this, I will not explain this. And discriminant function analysis was performed to know the difference between the perception of the line managers and strategic HR roles and the organizational learning capabilities, and we found that the HR managers differ significantly in their perception on both the variables, and also we have done the stepwise analysis of this. So, Yes, a stepwise analysis, and we found that organizational learning capabilities predict the performance of the firms which we had studied. This brings us to another issue of power of psychological empowerment, the power of psychological empowerment and the antecedents of the organizational commitment of Indian managers. And this issue, this study attempts to measure psychological empowerment. This is yet another study on commitment in a sample of 607 managers drawn from various organizations in India, grouped together in terms of technology they adopt, different technology groups, and the study attempts to predict the psychological empowerment through organizational commitment variables. And the results of this study support that there is a close relationship with the strategic management, and there are implications for Indian industries in terms of the HRD practices that we have. So, here with these we are closing today's discussion, and we will move on to the further issues in our next lecture on management now and beyond.